Okay, on today's show we have a big project. We're going to take the back dually tires off, one side, and we're going to replace the brakes, the rotor, and the caliper. Grease up the bearings, pull the axle out, put it all back together. It's a big job. It took me quite a while. Actually, this video I recorded a couple months back. I'm just now getting around to editing it. So stay tuned. Let's get to it.
When it's broke, we need to fix it. Okay, ready for a big project? We're going to take the brakes, the rotor, and the caliper off and replace it all. Another good job to do. Now on these older vehicles, they don't have screws that are holding the brake system on. They have these wedges that wedge in here on the top and on the bottom, and we're going to have to pound them out. They have a little rubber insert in them that expands as you pound them in. We're going to use a chisel and pick set that I got at Harbor Freight to stick in there and pound them out. Let's get it done. So I stick the tip of it in there, and I'm going to pound it out with a hammer, pushing it out from the front to the back. You got to watch the tip this. It gets narrower or thicker and thicker as you pound it in. At some point it'll stick in there, so you got to make sure you don't get it stuck. I have had that happen. You can see it coming out the back there. And now I'm grabbing a tool here, and I'm going to just yank it out the back. And there we have it. You can see it has this little tip edge at the top and the bottom. That little ridge is what holds it in as it expands inside the brake system. It's got like rubber in there, so when you pound it in, it then expands out and holds itself in place. Okay, let's get the bottom one pounded out. Get the punch put in there and pound this one out. Okay, I'm going to reach around the back, pull it out. There we go. There's number 2. I'll show you both of them together here in a second. I'll grab this one. This is what they look like. And on the new brake kit we have, it comes with 2 brand new ones, so we're not really going to use these, so no need to save them because we have 2 brand new ones to put in. Now right here on the top of the brake, this is where we're going to use a hammer and hit this to get this pounded out. A little bit at the top, a little bit at the bottom. They're really stuck in there really well, especially this one because this brake is actually seized up. It's rusted in position. Once you see this, when I take this off, you'll be amazed that we were even driving like this. Very dangerous. Now I'm sticking a chisel in there to help pry it out. Got a couple different sizes. There's a bigger one. I'm going to turn it around and use the butt end of it. Get this pried out till it comes off. Got to pound it a little bit more. A little bit more. And here it comes. Now you want to make sure you have a stand or something close by, like I have this little plastic bench to set it up onto. It's got a bit of weight to it, and you don't want to have it hanging because it is still hooked up in the back to the brake line. Now here's what our wonderful caliper brakes look like. The caliper is completely shot. That rubber's just ate away. The pistons are frozen in place. They're basically rusted. Look at that. That's just terrible. I was driving like that. I had no back brake there at all. No operational, nothing. Now I did disconnect the hose line there from the back of the brake. You can see it right there. And here's a little quick overview of what all this looks like before we get on to the next step. Now it's time to take the bolts out of the axle. Got a little bit of hyperspeed going. Get this done quick. Zip, zip, zip. And then we'll pull the axle out. You're going to have a little bit of rear end grease dripping here. So I'm going to pull my plastic tub over so I don't make such a huge mess. And then we're going to pull it on out. You'll see it has a metal gasket on it right there. That's still in good shape, so we're going to reuse that. So let's pull it on out. It's greasy, dirty, but this is what we need to do to replace all this. There we go. And there's the end of it where the gear is. Now we're going to use a special Ford axle nut tool that looks like this, because in the inside center area, that's your axle nut. That's what's holding all this on. And this special tool has these little grooves that fit into the grooves of the nut to be able to take it out. It's not very tight, so it's not a very hard thing to get out. I'm going to put the tool in there, swing it down to the left. There we go. That loosens it up. This is what holds in the tightness of your bearing. Your bearing is right behind here. And when you put this in, you don't want to have it too tight. We'll get into that in a little bit, because you want your wheel to be able to spin freely and your bearing to be able to lubricate and turn freely. Okay, a couple more turns and we'll have this out. It'll get so loose you don't even need the tool. You can just stick the axle nut tool in there without the wrench on it, or without your socket end on. Your socket end just plugs right into the tool. Get this unscrewed. You can see it spins nice and freely. That's what we want. You don't want your bearing to be too tight. Then it won't spin freely and it'll eat your bearings up and destroy them. Okay, let's pull that out. This is what your axle nut looks like. Once I get this out, there we go. And that's it. And your bearing is right inside there to come out next. We're going to just jar this a little bit, and that's going to loosen the bearing up. See, there you go. And that's going to pop out super easy. This bearing's in great shape. The last owner had new ones put in, so we're just going to replace these and put this one back in. Now we're going to pull this out. This is very heavy, so you need to be really careful on this. Get a good grip on it. You don't want to drop this on your foot. This could definitely break a toe or two. This is some pretty heavy metal. I'm going to set this over to the side here, and then we've got to take some bolts out of this. So here's a view of the inside of the bolts we need to take out so we can separate it so we can put on the new rotor. Now I'm going to try to take some of these bolts out with this Cobalt 24 Max tool here, and it doesn't work. It's not able to get any of these bolts out. I ended up having to take this whole large, very heavy item to a Napa store, service center down the road, and they were able to get the bolts out for me using some other tools, battery-powered tools, that worked better. I did another video on this Cobalt impact wrench showing that it didn't work for this, but it does work for some other things that are not as tight, so I did keep it and still use it. Here's a little overview of what we have so far. There's the old rotor sitting there, and I think that's our hub. I think that's called a hub. And then down below we have the brand new brake assembly and the new rotor that we're going to put on. So let's get to it. Okay, let's open up the new rotor, pull this out. Came brand new in this bag. It has a little bit of a hazy grease on it, so I'm going to spray some cleaner on it, some brake cleaner, and get it cleaned up, and then we'll get it put on. CRC brake cleaner I'm using. Now this one part just fits right on top of the other part. That's the two parts that we're taking apart. We got to line up the screw holes, and then we will get it all screwed together in hyperspeed. Now that's some fast drilling going on. Now I'm going to use this Blaster extra tacky red grease and put some of this on the shaft and everything. So now I'm going to add on the grease. You want this to be even in the back there. I'm putting it in the back area because you have a back bearing that pushes against that back area. And then you have your front bearing that's going to go in the front. We're also going to repack the front bearing with more of this red tacky grease so everything is very lubricated and ready to go before we put the new rotor on, and then brakes and calipers and so on. Okay, my wife's helping me lift this up and put this on because this is very heavy. Like I said, you don't want to drop this on your toe or your hand. I'm going to try to push this into position, and then we're going to get ready to put the new grease on the bearing and then put the bearing back in. A couple more pushes and alignment here and I'll have it all set, and that looks pretty good. Let's go on. Okay, here's the bearing that we took out. We are going to put this back in. It's in great shape. On the other side, I did replace the bearing and the race, but I didn't really need to. So on this side, we're going to reuse them. The last owner had put new ones in not too long ago. So I'm just going to repack grease in here. You want to get it greased up real good and push the grease in between all the bearings from both sides. And then we're going to mount it back in the axle area. I get it rubbed in there real good. That's why I've got gloves on. Don't want to get that grease all over my hands. I did that on the other side. It was quite a mess. Okay, I'm going to mount this and get this pushed back in here. It's just not seating just right. Might have to rearrange this a little bit. Let's try to move this out some. And I think I'm going to put some more red grease around the inside. Since I've got this popped out, we're going to put this on and then put some red grease. Take a fingerful of it and goop all this in the inside of this. We want the bearings to roll free and smooth with no problem. Get her all greased up. Okay, now this bearing should go right in there, I hope. Okay, there it goes. It pushes back in there. Now that it's in there, we'll give it a little bit of a spin test. I'll hold it in there, make sure everything's good. It's spinning nice and freely like it should. So everything is looking good. Another couple of spins. That's what it should be doing, nice and free and well lubricated. Just a little test before we put the axle nut back on, which we're going to do next. Now here's the axle nut that we took off earlier, and we are going to put it back on. You can see right there, there's a little slot, and there's a little stem sticking out on the axle nut, and that stem fits right into the slot just perfectly, so you can't put it on wrong, or it won't slide in to fit at all. Okay, let's push this in. There it goes. Fit right in the little groove there. The front of the axle nut actually spins a little bit. That's what turns and tightens it in. And as we get into this and tighten it, we don't want to tighten it too tight, because if you go overboard with it, you'll go past the point of your bearing being free and loose, and you want to keep your bearing loose. So what we're going to do is we're going to tighten it, and then we're going to back it off a couple of notches to loosen it up so it can spin freely. So let's get this tightened up. You can see your ratchet fits right into the end of the axle nut tool. And we'll spin this around, tightening it up. It's very easy. It's not nothing hard to do here at all. Even though this is quite a big job, especially if you're doing both sides and taking all the tires off. It's a bit of a nightmare, actually. Now we're testing it to see how it spins. I might have it a little bit too tight here. It's not spinning super freely, but I'm probably going to tighten it up one more time, just a little bit more, because this seats the bearing in there good to give it a nice firm tightness, and then we'll back it off. So that's pretty tight. You can see it spins, but it's not super free. So we're going to back it off 7 clicks. as you turn this, you can hear it clicking. So on each click, we're going to click it back 7 times is the recommended amount of clicks back to loosen it up. And then it should be a lot more freer and then spin a lot more easier. Now we're clicking it back 7 clicks here. Okay, that should do it. And look at there. That spins a lot more easier. The bearing is spinning very freely and it's well lubricated, and that's exactly what we want. Fantastic. Now we're going to move on to the next step. Now we're going to put the axle back in, and I did use some axle oil, and I re-oiled the axle, put some more axle oil on it, and we're going to insert that in. There you go, and there's that metal gasket still on it, and we've got to line up that gasket with the holes on both parts before, and then we will put the bolts back in. I'll just wiggle this around a little bit, get that lined up. I don't think I've got it lined up all the way there. There we go. And then we will proceed to put the bolts back in and tighten her up. A little hyper speed on the bolts going in so we can get through this quick. And there we go. And now I'm taking a large ratchet and I'm going to hand tighten them all, but I'm going to speed this up a little bit too so we can get through this fast. Zip, 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 fast, go, go, go. Fast hand tightening, there it is. Now we're going to place the back brake into the back area. It fits into a little slot. You pretty much can't get it too wrong there. It either fits or it doesn't fit. So you either have it right or you don't have it in there right at all. And there we have that. Now here's the brake caliper with the steel pistons and all the brand new rubber around it. We're going to use these special tools because we're going to push in the pistons because right now they're sticking out far enough to where you cannot put this on the new rotor. So I'm going to use a board here, use this tool. I've got 2 of these actually. I'm going to put one on each side. Let me spin this around. There we go. And the one side tightens and pushes against the back side of the caliper, pushing the wood into the pistons, which pushes them in, which gives you more space so you can mount this whole assembly and get everything working. Okay, here's the second one I'm putting on. So I'm going to put a little bit of pressure on both sides. This is going to push in both pistons. Push them so they're in nice and flat. This way, the whole caliper system will mount on. It's going to push the whole thing in about a 1/2 inch, maybe even 1 inch. I don't know if you can see it pushing in, but it is pushing in quite a bit. And then when I take these tools off, this is actually a brake tool, and then pull the board out, the cylinder will stay pushed in with the rubber pushed in tight, and that'll give us that extra gap of space that we need to be able to mount it on the new rotor. Otherwise, it won't fit. It would be damn near impossible to get it on. You could probably bang it on with a hammer, but you would scrape and scratch your new rotor. Not something that we want to do. Okay, let me take these tools off. And as you can see now, that is all pushed in. The pistons are pushed in nice and flat. Now we'll get this mounted onto the new rotor. Oh, but first we have to put the brake on the other side here. Can't forget that. This is the brake that goes on the outside. There's just a pin you got to pull out, and then it just snaps down in place. Watch your finger. I have snapped my finger in there before. That's not a fun thing. That fits in there just like that. And now we're going to mount it. Okay, let's grab it, and we're going to get it mounted here. We're going to have to hammer it some because this is a real tight fit from the top to the bottom. The metal is touching each other a little bit there, so we're going to use a hammer to hammer it on. Little hammering at the top. I'll do a little hammering at the bottom. It does put a little scratch marks in the nicely painted black caliper, but this is about the only way I can see to get this on. And a little bit at the bottom. We need to get it in place so we can push those pins in. Okay, now that's on. Let's slide one of these pins in. We'll start with the top one, and we're going to tap it in with the hammer. And then when we get it in far enough, then we will use one of our tools to tap it in to get it tapped in a little bit further. There we go. Now we'll use this tool just like we used this to pound the pins out. Now we're using it to pound the pins in. You can feel in the front and the back and make sure that it's all the way through, and we got it. Now let's move on to the bottom and pound in the bottom pin. Same procedure. Pound it in, then use our other tool, put the tip on it, and pound that into the rest of the way. Check it in the front and the back. Got those little tabs on each end that you can feel with your finger to make sure you've got it in all the way. So that little tab is sticking out a little bit on each side, and that wedges it with that rubber that's in there. It just expands out and just holds it in place instead of using screws or bolts like they do in the newer ones. Now let's get some tires put on. We have new brakes, a new rotor, a new caliper. Let's get this all put back together and get on the road. Got to line these holes up just right. Give it a couple kicks or two. Let me see here. Move it this way, move it that way. I think it needs a good kick. Just kick it. One more. There we go. Got it on. Now let's put the bolts on. Oh wait, one more tire. Okay, here's the second outside tire of our dually tires. We have that on, and now we're going to get it bolted up. If I can find my bolts, there they are. Start putting these in. I'll do a little bit of hyper speed here and do some fast action bolt putting on. This is the second side that I've done. I did the other side too. Had to replace everything as well. The brakes on the other side were literally leaking. So we had no back brakes whatsoever. So when you buy a used ambulance, you might want to check your brakes out and check your rotors, your calipers, and everything. You never know what you're in for. Plus, when you do all this yourself, you know it's done, and you know it's done right. Or even if you have it done at a shop, at least you know it's done and you have new products. Whoa, wow, there we are. We're on the road. Everything's looking good.
Whew! Finally got all that done. Well, that was the end of our video today. I hope you enjoyed it. Please like, subscribe, share, watch our videos. Going to have a lot more coming. That was a big job we did today, changing all that out, and I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you next time.